world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Tuesday, the 14th of July, year of our Lord 2026. Well, we have more vacillation, more boasting talk about the Iran war, and of course it is back on big time. And Trump is talking about being the guardian of Hormuz. You know, everything was fine until you got there, but I think it's kind of interesting that we just had the celebration of the second anniversary of the Butler so-called assassination attempt. And at the same time, you had some people put up a monument in Washington on the Mall. It is a Trump participation trophy for the war in Iran, with the idea that maybe if we give this guy enough awards, maybe he will stop the wars. Well, we'll take a look at the people who are defending Lindsey Graham. Yeah, defending the indefensible. And where's it coming from? It's coming from none other than Christians blinded by an evil theology that replaces Christ with Israel and ranks people based on their ethnicity. That's right. How unchristian can you get? We'll be right back. Stay with us. Well, we're going to begin with just the general news here, because across the board, across Western civilizations, not just America, but of course it's the EU, it's every other developed nation, they're all turning into banana republics, said Pavel Durov. He is the founder of Telegram, and of course he has experienced the teeth of tyranny, being arrested in France because he had the audacity to set up a free speech platform. And he continues to talk about it. He says, once typical of banana republics, these tricks that are being used by the EU to pass surveillance laws, a controversial framework describing it as a vital tool, listen to this, for the protection of children. Oh, for the protection of children. I'm so sick and tired of these cynical tyrants telling us that they want to protect children. You understand, we've had so many MacGuffins. We've had the climate MacGuffin. First it was the global cooling, then global warming, then climate in general. Then it was the pandemic. All of this is to protect the children, of course, right? And now we have to have a regime of censorship and global digital ID in order to protect the children. No, I think we protect our children by making sure they don't have to live in a future that is Orwellian, where Big Brother watches and controls and gives you permission for everything that you do. He went on to say, when the largest groups use political weight to force another vote on mass scanning measures that have already failed, that should concern anyone who cares about institutional integrity. And one person commented on it, said, it's impressive to see the European Parliament being backstabbed by its own president, who was calling it out. He warned that this so-called chat control law allows tech companies to snoop without a warrant and with little to no oversight, and with no legal basis, on millions of conversations. This is what they all want. This has always been the dream of people in power. And folks, we have had tyrants in power for the longest time. George W. Bush, Justin Trudeau. It doesn't matter their so-called political orientation, what political party they run with, or what they tell you they really want to see happening. What they really want to see happening is they've always wanted, each and every one of them, to be dictators like China. And of course, that's why the globalist agenda, and they're all following the same globalist agenda. That's why the globalists set up China as a beta test site for this very thing. The Permission Society, the Traffic Light Society, the Social Credit Society. Yeah, government always uses the children as justification, and yet look at how they attack the children. You know, ramping up vaccines and giving legal immunity to the vaccine companies to literally kill children. And they don't want to have a lot of children. They're anti-family, they're anti-child, they're anti-human population. They want to depopulate the world, and yet they keep coming to us with this radical tyranny saying it is to save the children. And again, the Online Safety Act in the UK Or here in America, we have Marsha Blackburn introducing the Kids Online Safety Act. Big difference, isn't it? Whenever you see these people lined up, whenever you see a so-called conservative Republican like Marsha Blackburn aligned with a leftist labor politician, Keir Starmer, on an agenda, pay attention. That's the one that they really want to go through. They can tolerate these differences on other side issues, but the central issue that is vital for a global technocracy is this digital ID, digital currency, and surveillance state. And that's Marsha Blackburn checks every single one of those boxes multiple times, as a matter of fact. Well, as we look at a key part of this, of course, the Flock camera network, it's kind of interesting. I nearly fell out of my chair when I saw this headline. Flock is falling out of favor with police departments. It's like, what? How does that work? Generally, they love this kind of stuff. I just reported last week about a cop who had a fascination with a woman that he was doing a security detail at a TV production. He saw an extra there that he thought was great, so he put her on the hot list and started stalking her. You put somebody on the hot list, and Flock tells you everywhere it sees them. So it constantly gives you an alert as to where this person is. And he nearly had a couple of head-on collisions as he passed all these different trucks on two-lane highway in the Florida Keys. If you've ever been there, it's a very narrow bridge, just 2 lanes. It's very old. And the fact that this guy would be racing around these cars, desperate to pull her over. He was caught. He was disciplined. However, I look at this as like, why is it falling out of favor with police departments? Well, this is another example, folks, of two-tier policing, just like we've seen in the UK, where don't mess with the migrants. We're going to protect them at all cost. You, however, come here. We got something to talk to you about, right? The LA Police Department is letting its deal with Flock expire. They let it expire over the past weekend. Flock is saying, well, we think we can get them back. They probably can. I'm sure that they will offer them some financial incentives because LAPD was one of the first customers and one of its largest customers. It is, of course, a nationwide network of more than 80,000 cameras that scan license plates to help law enforcement agencies trace vehicles. But it's not just the license plate. They basically do biometric identification, if you will, on your car. They come up with unique identifiers for it. Well, look, it's got a dent over here, or it's got this kind of bumper sticker, or there's something unusual that they have done in one way or the other to identify it over and above the automated license plate readers. But here's why they had a problem with Flock. An LAPD audit report said the department had a 3-year contract with Flock. They had 138 pole-mounted cameras across LA since July of 2023, but their audit cited concerns that federal agencies could have access to data collected by Flock and that they might use this for immigration enforcement. We can't have that. Right? This is exactly what you're seeing in the UK. Can't have anything that's going to stop immigration. And we're going to have 2 different classes of people here, right? They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about search warrants. They don't care about your privacy, your individual liberty. But they do care about setting up enough immigrants so that we can have they can have divide and conquer. And they can set up a 2-tier system here. Flock had implemented an information sharing pilot program that allowed federal agencies to access their data without those agencies that are local knowing about it or consenting to it. So, again, it is evil and they're opposing it, but not for the right reasons. They need to be opposing it because they're doing this to everybody. A growing number of police jurisdictions have walked away from Flock since 2025. Including Mountain View, Santa Cruz, Santa Clara County, South Pasadena, Flagstaff, and Hillsborough, North Carolina. Now, I know Hillsborough, North Carolina. We used to live right adjacent to that. One of the most leftist places in North Carolina. So I can guarantee you that all these different places that are in California and Hillsborough, North Carolina, this is about protecting the migrants. And look, I don't like what ICE is doing. But I also don't like uncontrolled immigration. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And of course, what Trump always picks is the wrong way to do it. And what he does is he discredits and makes odious the things that we really should be trying to do. Breaking up with Flock has proven harder, however, than just signing up. Because in Dayton, Ohio, they wanted to get rid of the Flock cameras. So they, rather than taking them down, what they did was you had city workers go out and put garbage bags over the cameras. And they came back and took those down. In Illinois, they took down the cameras, and Flock reinstalled them after the city had removed them. And so then that resulted in a cease and desist letter before they were ultimately taken down months later. So Flock's automated license plate readers have led to innocent drivers being stopped at gunpoint, innocent drivers being mauled by police dogs, innocent drivers being jailed after their vehicles were incorrectly flagged. I've reported on many of these. People who their Flock cameras flag them, and of course, the police don't want to hear anything. I'm sorry, the computers don't make mistakes, right? People can make mistakes, but you were flagged by Flock and by AI. And even though you say you were in a different state at the time this incident that we're talking about, that we're arresting you for, even though you say you're in a different state, we don't believe you. We believe the AI and the camera.
It's also just as simple as the fact that if the computer makes a mistake, if he enforces that mistake, that's the computer's problem. The computer
That's right.
is the one at fault. He throws his hands up and says, "Hey, the computer told me to do it. If it made a mistake, that's its problem.
Not my job." Yeah, and that's it's good to have Travis back, by the way, folks. He's been gone for 2 months, and Lance has done an excellent job filling in for him as the on the board here. But Travis is back, as you just heard. Welcome back, Travis.
It's good to be back.
Yes, it is. And it's good to have you. And just imagine when they have the autonomous killer robots commit a mass atrocity. Well, it's not my problem. I mean, they're even saying that when the IDF massacres Israelis after, as part of October the 7th.
I, for one, cannot wait to be pulled over by Ed 209.
Yeah, exactly. Put the weapon down. I don't have a weapon. He's like, put the weapon down. One man in Toledo was arrested and suffered serious injuries after Flock's camera misread the 7 on his plate as a 2 and flagged the vehicle to the police as stolen. They could wind up killing people. I'm sure that it's just a matter of time before somebody is killed under false arrest for this. You look at what happened with the ICE issue in Houston. They're saying, as they always do, well, he rammed us with his vehicle. It's like, I'm sorry, I want to see the video of that. If that really happened, you should have video of it. They're constantly recording stuff. Why didn't they release the video right away? I think the fact they didn't show a video, and I think the fact that we have looked at their history of what they have claimed in the past, and remember, it was not just the people on the ground, it was also the people at the top. Kristi Noem saying, well, I saw the video, and they were, this person was attacking these ICE agents who were stuck in the snow. Remember that? Nothing at all like that happened. And everybody at that point in time had already seen the incident from multiple camera angles and knew she was lying, but she did anyway, and called them terrorists. And Trump did the same thing, and he was confronted with some New York Times reporters who were in the Oval Office at the time. He goes, oh, get the tape. They go get the tape, and he looks at it, doesn't say a thing. He changes the topic. These people just lie for whatever they want. Anyway, earlier in 2026, Amazon canceled the planned partnership with Flock and their Ring camera. They did an ad during the Super Bowl, and there was widespread backlash against the Amazon Ring cameras, and there should be. Because the Amazon Ring cameras are basically doing the same thing the Flock cameras are doing. Why wouldn't they merge? And you should understand that they're both collecting your data, and they're both selling that surveillance data to the state. And folks, this is connected really to what Durov Pavel was saying in terms of Telegram. We have to understand, and I think it is vital for us to understand that, and I said this throughout all the censorship that began against me personally and was happening when I was at InfoWars in 2018. And you would have people like Reason, the Cato Institute, and I remember John Stossel particularly writing for Reason. He said, I hate the fact that I'm getting censored on these social media platforms, but hey, it's a private corporation. They can do whatever they want to me. Like, seriously? I mean, when you talk about the liberals, they worship government. And unfortunately, too many libertarians and conservatives worship corporations. They are not God. As a matter of fact, it was God who endowed us with inalienable rights. And the purpose of government is to protect those rights. To protect those rights, even if they are stolen by a corporation that ought to be working in a free market rather than as a deputy for a government that pretends that it's not the one that's really behind this. I said for the longest time, before we even got the documents absolutely proving it, I said the social media companies, even though they might be philosophically aligned on some of these issues that they're censoring us on, they are the velvet glove over the iron fist of censorship coming from the government. The government has sent them to do this, and they're more than willing to be participants in it for the favors that they can get from government. So what it does is it's government corruption, it's government censorship, it is government surveillance, but they claim that it's corporations and the corporations are free to do whatever they want. It's a free market. And it's like, that is nothing at all like a free market. It is corrupt crony capitalism. It is, in a word, folks, fascism. Fascism is the merger of corporations and government. And that's the economic definition of it. But this is the political definition of it, where they literally work together to impose an Orwellian state on people. U.S. Attorney Theodore Hertzberg announced federal charges against a Texas man on Monday for allegedly leaving anti-Semitic and homophobic threats on Flock company voicemail inbox. Imagine that. We have the Trump regime that doesn't like free speech. Yeah, constantly intimidating people with it. Of course, over the weekend you had Donald Trump send his thugs, and I don't call them law enforcement, they're thugs, if they're going to go to a reporter's house and intimidate them for something they wrote.
Also, I've just got to say, they focus on the fact that he's making homophobic and anti-Semitic threats, and then as a tagline they go, oh, and breaking the Constitution, but who really cares about that? The main point is that he's being homophobic and anti-Semitic. Whether the company's breaking the Constitution, who cares about that?
There's your Trump regime DEI, right? You thought it was just the Democrats? No, you're wrong. They've got their own DEI. Don't you dare criticize Israel, or then you are racist, racist, racist. Remember? That is such a trope. Whenever you talk to the Democrats in a situation where there's protests or there's conflicts on the two sides, they see you, they just keep shouting racist, 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 right? They never have anything to say. And yet that's what we get from the Republicans and the GOP. If you criticize what the nation of Israel is doing, oh, you are anti-Semitic and we have to cancel you. And we're going to brag about canceling you, but don't you dare say that we have the ability to cancel you. Don't you dare say that we control everything, as we brag about the fact that, you know, we take from this woman who criticized the Israeli genocide. They made sure that she couldn't bank anymore, that she was banned from entering or leaving the United States. They got her husband even demoted in his job because he said that they could control everything. So we'll show you, we'll make sure you never work in this town again, right? Flock safety spokesperson told Business Insider the company will have ongoing discussions with the LAPD to address misconceptions that led to a, quote, disappointing pause. It hopes to resume its successful partnership very soon, they said, and I'm sure they will. Well, people are really losing it, and they're sawing these camera poles down and destroying the cameras and so forth. Just a word to the wise, don't take that back to your house. If they catch you and they find you with the equipment, then they total up the cost of the equipment and charge you with theft, which is more serious usually than vandalism. But this is a shirtless man who went crazy and attacked a Waymo in California. Pull up the picture of that, Travis, if you got it. I saw the picture of this guy, and he is, I think it's up near the top. There's one, maybe not on this article. There was another article where he's laying on the windshield, and the windshield is smashed and bent in like he fell on it from a couple of stories high or something. But, of course, I looked at that, and I thought, what an odd situation. He doesn't seem to be hurt, but it broke the windshield. And, of course, the windshield's a safety glass. They've got laminated plastic in them. They don't, go all the way through, so you don't get hit with the shards on it. But nevertheless, why do you even need a windshield on a Waymo? It doesn't need to see where it's going through the windshield. It's got other cameras and radar. So this is a guy laying on the broken windshield, until he got up and started ripping off the equipment that's on the top of the car.
Remember, folks, it's important to not find a mentally ill homeless person and pay them to vandalize autonomous vehicles or flock cameras. Whatever you do, do not give a homeless man $10 and point him at a flock camera.
That's right. That's right. It's truly is amazing. Of course, this is on Sunset Boulevard, so I guess this guy was ready for his close-up, Mr. DeMille, and he jumped on this thing with both feet, I guess. Waymo has expanded its operations across L.A. They did that last summer, so this has been going on for about a year. And the result of it are traffic problems. And one thing after that, we were talking about 4th of July, one of them, they all stalled and created a massive traffic jam. I don't know if that was in California, I think. And also had one that
happened in Austin, too, if memory serves.
Yeah. But on 4th of July, they had a massive stalling of these Waymos in a city in California and created this horrific gridlock situation. Another incident, they've driven through floods. And then on 4th of July, one of them drove over a box of fireworks that was exploding in the middle of the intersection somebody had put there. People inside it said, I can't believe this is happening. I guess they thought they were going to die with a battery catching fire or something. But yeah, that is the wonderful future. What would we do without Silicon Valley? I would like to find out. All of these things that are supposed to take us into the future are either dystopian or enshittified. They are garbage. And so we have congressional ratification of Trump's corporatism, says Ron Paul. He calls him a corporatist. I call him a communist fascist. He's just like China. And understand, like I said before, they picked China as the beta test site. This is what they want. They want the permission society. They want the social credit system. They want the traffic light system. They want digital ID, and they want digital currency, all the rest of this. And when you do that, what happens to the leaders that are in charge in these types of societies? Well, they get to dip their beak, as the organized crime figures in Hollywood said. I get to dip my beak, and then I get a cut of that. You don't have a business allowed in China unless you make the government your partner. And that means that the government officials are going to get rich on the side. That's understood. And guess what? That's what Trump is doing now. As Ron Paul said, despite regularly denouncing the rising socialist menace, Trump has been pursuing a policy that arguably is just as, if not more dangerous to liberty and prosperity as anything that's been proposed by Mom Danny or Bernie Sanders, using government funds to purchase partial ownership of private companies. And so this is a Trump mixture of communism and fascism, and it is inherently corrupt. He's obtained ownership interests of approximately 30 companies using $27 billion worth of taxpayer money. And what Ron Paul points out is that this distorts the capital markets, because when people look at the government picking a winner, it's like winner, winner, chicken dinner. Let's get into this. They're buying stock in Intel. It's too big to fail. Hey, everything rhymes. How about that? And so everybody jumps into it, even if whether it's a good investment or not a good investment. And of course, the capital markets already have enough problems with distortion without Trump making it even worse. But the reason he's doing this is because it enriches his family business, the crime family of the Trump family. But also understand that, picking the winners and losers, and who does Trump always pick? He always picks the big guys. He picked the big guys and sided with them when he enacted medical martial law in 2020 and was shutting everybody down. Oh, no. If you're a big box retailer on Wall Street, you can stay open. And as I've said before, I personally experienced this when we had a hurricane come through an area that 13 years that we had a video store chain. Never had a situation where we ever closed, except when all the power went off everywhere. And then when power came back on around one of the stores, we went in, and Karen and I personally operated the store to get it open. And after a while, we had the cops come by and tell us that we had to shut it down. I said, why? Well, people are going to come in and they see your light. And where we were, they really couldn't see us. That was one of the problems of that location. We didn't have exposure on the street. It was down low and that type of thing. But I said, Walmart is open across. Oh, that's Walmart. That's okay. It's okay for Walmart to open up. Walmart isn't going to be drawing people in. You are going to be drawing people in, this little business. And so when Trump did that, that hit a raw nerve. Let me tell you, I was not very happy that day. And I will never forget that. Never forget it. So this is the kind of thuggish corruption and fascism that Trump is setting up and setting the precedent for. But just remember that, and I touched on it just a little bit yesterday, the fact that he has such a hardcore authoritarian heart. If you go back to, and I think it was the Playboy issue that he was on the cover of Playboy, and don't worry, he was not the one undressing. It was someone that had a woman that was there. That would be a horrible sight to see, wouldn't it? But in 1990, right after Tiananmen Square, he had an interview with Playboy magazine. And because people had already started touting him as running for office, they asked him a lot of political questions. And he had something to say about Tiananmen Square. And what he had to say is absolutely outrageous, but it really gets to the heart of this guy. He said, when the students poured into Tiananmen Square, the Chinese government almost blew it. They almost blew it, but then they got it together and they killed everybody. And that was a good thing, right? He said, but then they were vicious. They were horrible, but they put it down with strength. And that shows you the power of strength. Our country is right now perceived as weak. And so what he's saying here, and he really hasn't changed in the 36 years since, has he? Perhaps he's gotten worse, right? There's nothing worse. I mean, you can kill hundreds of thousands of people, and they did. You can kill hundreds of thousands of people, but don't show anybody that you're weak. This is one of the reasons why he ludicrously is constantly boasting about the Iran war and then crying out for help from NATO at the same time, and he thinks people don't see it. He thinks that's not weakness, but it is. And so when you look at when he talks about the power of strength, what an idiotic way to phrase this. It's the way a fourth grader might talk. He's got the heart of a tyrant. He's got the mind of a 10-year-old. But what he's really talking about here is the power of authoritarianism, the power of ruthlessness. That's what he's talking about. Having people fear you. That's the kind of government that he admires, the kind of government that he is imposing on us. And remember, it's not just Tiananmen Square. I've talked many times about, when they started preemptively killing people extrajudicially in Venezuela. Oh, I see a boat out there. Well, I think that's a drug dealer. Let's just kill all the people there. Oh, we didn't get everybody. Let's circle back around and we'll execute the people who are floundering in the water, shipwrecked, which is a violation of international law if it was a war, a legitimate war. It's not. But if it were a legitimate war, it'd be a violation, it'd be a war crime. But since it's supposedly not a war, it's just flat out murder. But he admired Robert Duterte in the Philippines, who was doing exactly the same thing to fight the drug war. He told his police, he said, if you see somebody that you think is a drug dealer, you can kill him. Well, Duterte is now before the International Criminal Court. And the Trump administration is now on a crusade to try to stop the International Criminal Court because they have noticed Trump's crimes as well as particularly Netanyahu's crimes. Yeah, we don't want to have a criminal court, do we? We just want to have criminals who run free. We're going to take a quick break at the bottom of the hour, folks, and we're going to be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Well, welcome back, and thank you, Stealth Patriot, for the tip on Rumble. I appreciate that. He says the flock camera revolution is our Boston Tea Party. That is a great analogy, quite frankly. Maybe we should all dress up like Indians when we do it. That'd really get them, wouldn't it?
That'd get you a hate crime charge.
Politically incorrect. Yeah, I like the term Indian. I think that's a great term. Russell Means and the American Indian movement used that. Russell Means said, let's not talk about Native Americans because there's a lot of people whose relatives who have been here for centuries. They're Native Americans. I consider myself to be a Native American. I can trace my ancestry back to the earliest settlers. But the American Indian, I think, is a great term for it. And this whole idea they have to purge this everywhere. I remember in Florida, they wanted to get rid of the mascot for Florida State University, the Seminoles. And so they wanted to get rid of that. But the Seminoles, the Indian tribe of Florida, said, no, we don't like that. We're honored by that. It's like, you should be honored by that. As a matter of fact, you had, I remember one radical American Indian who decided that he would troll white people, and he came up with T-shirts that were the Fighting Whiteys. And he had like the typical 1950s stereotypical white male in a suit holding a pipe, and they sold out of that merchandise just like that. He kept making more of it, and he made a lot of money selling that to people because they liked that. And I never really understood why people get so upset about the fact that people are using Indians as mascots. The junior high school as well as the high school I went to both did, and it wasn't disrespect at all. Nevertheless, we should dress up like Indians and do something about the flock cameras, I think. Thank you very much, conservative thinker, Conthink. I just want to make it known that on Friday, I prayed and asked the Lord to remove Lindsey Graham from office. Well, good. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. We'll talk about that as we come up. So it was you, was it? It's a praise the Lord. Yeah, we've got the people who have an imprecatory prayer. I'm sure it was. And that's biblical. Go back to the Psalms, you can find many of those. Remove the criminals from this world. And at the same time, we look at this and why do the wicked prosper? That is always a question. And we understand that it is just for a little while that they prosper, and their portion is in this life. And then there is nothing after that for them except punishment. Handy, my city listed a $60,000 budget item for 16 flock cameras in 2024, $70,000 for 16 cameras in 2025. Not one time was flock mentioned in any meeting minutes for either year. They keep it secret, keep it safe, right? That is, the surveillance state works best when they keep it all secret. And they continue, as they continue down this path of tyranny, they continue with their paranoia as well. It continues to escalate. They've got a new supposedly anti-drone SUV that's part of the Trump motorcade, the presidential motorcade. It's just amazing to me. That was one of the things that stuck out the most to me in the excellent movie about John Adams, where they had John Adams and a guy who played Thomas Jefferson. I thought they were spot on in terms of the way they portrayed the characters. And at one point in time, the two of them were adversaries because what they did at the beginning was they would take the number one vote getter because they had multiple candidates. They weren't restricted to two like we are. And the multiple vote getter would be the president, and the number two would be the vice president. So you'd frequently have a situation like you did with President Adams, where his vice president, Jefferson, was adamantly opposed to a lot of his policies that he was doing. The Alien and Sedition Act and other things like that. And so as part of this movie, the two of them are walking down the streets of Washington, and they don't have an army of people to protect them. They don't have snipers on the roof to protect them. They don't have armored cars or anything like that. No armored chariots, nothing. Didn't have a column of soldiers to guard them. Why not? Well, because they were not hated by the people. Because they were not tyrants. Because they were not starting foreign wars, because they were not assassinating people abroad, because they were not creating coups. All of these things blow back on them. But what is the response? If they really wanted peace, if they really wanted to protect us. They would stop these acts of aggression and criminality abroad. Instead, what they do is they hunker down and they build bigger defenses for themselves, not for us, for themselves. And understand that this kind of war is going to come to us. People don't think that it will. You know, we look at it, and for the longest time, you know, my entire life, the threat has been nuclear weapons being shot in by intercontinental ballistic missiles or something coming out of Cuba when I lived in Florida as a child. But that's not the threat now. The threat, and they've already found it, are the drones, even the wired drones that operate with fiber optics so that you can't jam them with electronics. But the real problem is these point-of-view drones that are suicide drones. That's what's happening in Ukraine and with Russia. And both sides are really powerless to stop this. I don't know what they think they're going to do here. They have, they're out there working very diligently to try to protect their data centers, to try to protect their politicians and so forth. What it reminds me of is a book, and I've talked about this before, Raven Rock, The Plan to Save Themselves and Let the Rest of Us Die. That, folks, in a nutshell, is what they mean by national security. To save themselves and let the rest of us die, when they are the ones who initiate the aggression that results in the response from other people. And we're seeing that now. The Israeli government has given some intelligence to Trump. Oh, well, the Iranians want to kill you. Well, I don't know where that came from.
I
why
imagine
would they want to do that?
Yeah, probably. You've been bombing their country nonstop for months. I imagine most Iranians are not very happy with Trump. Gee, what vital information. Who could have told him this?
Well, he also assassinated in his first term. He assassinated a general that they had there.
Yeah, Soleimani.
Soleimani, and then he assassinated their leader at the beginning of this war of aggression initiated on behalf of Israel. So why would he think that they might assassinate him? Those are bigger issues, folks, than the signs that were there with the massive millions of people that showed up in the streets to mourn the regime that he said they hated and that he was going to change. And they had signs up there, you know, to kill Trump and kill this person, kill that person, Netanyahu and so forth. They have put that type of thing up. The death to America, death to Israel has been the chant since 1979. But they're not really acted on it. And so that is really for domestic consumptions. But it also, why did they hate America so much? Nobody ever talks about that. They always talk about the 47-year nonsense. You need to 86 that 47. The actual number is 73. 73 years ago, we overthrew their government and we installed a dictatorial, tyrannical king called the Shah. Shah is Persian for king.
Shah enough.
Yeah, and they had Shah enough of our form of government. You know, we're going around spreading democracy. Is that what we're really doing, making the world safe for democracy? No, our coups put in some of the worst leaders. And Ayatollahs are a blowback against the Shah that we put in. But for most Americans, and you still hear this, just this last week, we heard Ted Cruz mention it again, the 47 years, a magic number. And supposedly that's just out of the clear blue sky. They decided that they hated America and wanted to take over the embassy. So the Tiananmen Square protests were student-led demonstrations, as I was talking about Trump's reaction to them. It culminated in the Chinese government declaring martial law and sending the military to occupy parts of China, killing demonstrators and bystanders, very much like Trump's ICE program that he has. He said at the time, you know, we've heard the quote, he said, and I don't know if that one is true or not, but in the Playboy interview, he said if he ever ran, he'd be better as a Democrat than as a Republican. Folks, he is a Democrat. He's a New York City Democrat. He said, I would do better with him, not because I'm more liberal, but because I'm more conservative. Don't ever mistake authoritarianism for conservatism. We're trying to conserve the Constitution. That's what real conservatism is. But what he's trying to do is establish a system of authoritarianism. LT Oracle of Light, thank you for a tip. He said, David, I saw on MSN that Lady Lindsay's net worth was only $500,000. Does he have a closet of cold bucks.
Probably a bunch of offshore accounts, or he's being paid in other ways than money.
In a sense, I think he took a joy in the journey, right? You could see the glee in his and the twinkle in his eyes when he's talking about we're killing all the right people. This is a guy who really loved his work, and his work was killing people and starting wars. And that, I think, was its greatest reward for him. Meanwhile, judges found that Trump and the Department of Justice colluded with their settlement behind the anti-weaponization fund. There were a lot of former judges and prosecutors who really urged this judge to make this decision. They said these people are trying to whitewash the crimes that they're doing. There was no lawsuit going on. You can't be plaintiff and defendant at the same time. They said what they're trying to do is use the justice system to whitewash their corporation, their corruption, I should say. A federal judge on Monday blasted Trump's settlement with the IRS, finding that the lawsuit that served as the hook for the $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund amounted to collusion, as the two parties were never truly averse. U.S. District Judge Kathleen Williams also sanctioned Trump's attorneys on the case, while suggesting that acting Attorney General Todd Blanche should be disciplined. And this is all happening just a week or two before he goes before the Senate for actual confirmation. So he's put in a temporary position, subject to later confirmation hearings. And by the time they get to the confirmation hearings, they're saying he should be disciplined. Discipline him by keeping him out of the Department of Justice as Attorney General. Trump sued his own administration in January with a leak of his tax returns, which, by the way, he wasn't the only one. He was not singled out. This is not about him. This is a contractor to the IRS who went through and released the tax returns of dozens of billionaires who don't pay taxes to embarrass them. And Trump is the one who sued them and sued them for billions of dollars. That's, in and of itself, speaks volumes. So this so-called anti-weaponization fund, remember how corrupt that was. Trump was going to pick the people that were going to be on a committee. That committee was going to decide who was going to get the money. They would do that unilaterally. He would be able to put people on the committee and remove the people on the committee, but there would be nothing public about who gets the money or whatever. It was just so unbelievably corrupt, the way the thing was structured to hide the reality of what they were doing. In a later move, Blanche signed a memo that would forever bar and preclude the IRS from taking any action related to Trump's past tax returns. It extended to all of his businesses and to his family members as well. So why would he need that? Was he committing tax crimes? The facts before the court demonstrate there was never any adverseness between the parties. There was never a case, never a controversy. There was never a question as to who would prevail, said the judge. The plaintiffs improperly employed this lawsuit to justify a particular award in this matter, and that is access to taxpayer funds and exemption from audits and other investigations. And they wanted to accomplish this by leveraging control over the defendants. She found that Trump's $10 billion case against the IRS was, quote, brought for an improper purpose to gain the imprimatur of judicial legitimacy for a so-called settlement that had no viable basis in law or in fact. And she also referred Trump's lawyer in Florida to the bar for disciplinary action. You need to disbar this guy. Also, to alert the New York bar about another one of his lawyers, and to call for Todd Blanche to be sanctioned as well as the Associate Attorney General Stanley Woodward. And she suggested that if Trump had brought the lawsuit, quote, in a timely fashion when he was a private citizen, the case might have been resolved within a span of months. But that is not what happened. Instead, Trump did not pursue his claims until he was once again in the White House, and had appointed his former lawyer and former lawyer of persons who are putative beneficiaries of the anti-weaponization fund to prominent positions on the DOJ. It's unclear to what extent her order will block the anti-weaponization fund, because the DOJ pointed to the settlement as a rationale for establishing the fund. The department has the power to do so without having outside lawsuits. Nevertheless, because of the backlash, even from other Republicans, about the unbelievable corruptness of this, even Republicans in the Senate are saying, if you do this, we're probably done, and rightfully they would be done if there's any justice at all. But so because of that, Blanche is saying that he is not going to disperse any funds from that. The ruling comes just days before he's set to appear before the Senate for confirmation hearings. Trump's suit sought to extract money from a series of people that he has the power to fire, she said. That's exactly right. Yeah. Please don't fire me. Please don't hurt my family. That's basically what this all amounts to. She slammed the DOJ memo blocking audits of Trump's tax returns, calling it a blanket grant of immunity, which, it should be, that should be obvious, the corruption of that. And shouldn't it be obvious that we have a blanket grant of immunity to the vaccine companies? That should be the flag to warn everybody about what is happening with that. You don't need a blanket grant of immunity if you're not committing crimes. They are committing crimes. She said it's wholly incompatible with the duties of the Department of Justice attorneys to enforce the law, to protect the public. And so she has barred any government entity from investigations or actions against Trump. Not she has, but the memo barred that. So she said, whether executive branch actors can privately agree to give themselves and their former clients blanket immunities and billions of dollars in taxpayer money for legally undefined grievances was never an issue that was advanced to this court. So that's not even the issue. So the question before this court was, could they claim to be adversaries in this and have the legitimacy of a court proceeding? She said the answer is a resounding no. She said this is a fraud on the court. I wasn't asked to rule on your corruption, but this is a fraud on the court. So as we look at this, I think is another Democrat politician like Trump. Same attitude. This is a Democrat lawmaker, a state lawmaker, who was caught on multiple instances driving over 100 miles an hour or nearly 100 miles an hour in an area with a 65-mile-an-hour speeding zone. And she lectured and berated the cops who pulled her over, telling them, don't you know anything about the state constitution? You can't arrest a legislator on their way to the legislature, right? Of course, this is something that was put in a long time ago. That was a popular tactic for stopping legislation that they didn't want to get passed, right? They would bring it up, and when the opposition was on its way to the legislature, they would have somebody arrest them over some made-up charge, so they would miss the vote. So they made it a crime. But in one of these instances, she was leaving the legislature even. Clearly, this was not the situation. And in neither of these cases was she arrested either. And so she claimed legislative privilege. This is in New Hampshire. And said, you don't have a right to stop me. I'm above the law. This person, if she wasn't a Democrat, she would be exactly the type of person they're looking for in the Trump regime. She would probably be put in as head of the Department of Transportation. So don't you dare. I'm not one of the little people. These laws don't apply to me. As a matter of fact, we understand it's not just a two-tier system. They got a lot of different tiers. One physician who has left his career out of disgust over what he saw during the so-called COVID plague. He said people were treated as if they were dirty plague rats if they were not vaccinated. This is a physician, Dr. James Miller, who has set up a Substack, but he just recently did an interview with Alex Mayer. He said that the unvaccinated were treated as dirty plague rats. He said hospitals were actually nothing more than killing fields. That's what we've been saying from the very beginning. So they're killing people with ventilators. They're killing people with remdesivir. The people who are dying in the hospital. They refuse to treat people unless it's going to be a vaccine or a ventilator or remdesivir. They turn people away. He said he started seeing that. He was disgusted with that. So he was a Christian. See, that's a key thing here. He was a Christian. And so he worked with his pastor to set up free medical care. He said he had a guy at church tell him that he had a chronic condition and they refused to give him any medication or treatment for it. And he said, I couldn't believe it at first. But then he said, I looked at it and it was actually happening. He said they started just denying basic health services to unvaccinated people, which spurred not giving diabetes medicine to some of them. He said you could still get emergency care in the ER, but you were 100% treated differently. You were treated as a dirty plague rat, and this was common in social media, but it was no different in the hospital. The medical community is no different. He said the Overton window has shifted now since the pandemic. People realize the medical establishment is not what they had previously trusted it to be unquestionably. And so now people are looking at the mask is off, and we have seen the ruthless self-interest of these corporate hospitals. And that's what he's talking about. He said after COVID, most people realized their doctors were there for themselves. And quite frankly, it is the corporate takeover of these hospitals, massive networks of for-profit hospitals. But of course, the message for the doctors that are there is that you play along with this or you're out. And so the doctors really are doing this out of their own interests. He said most people came to see that the hospitals were really killing fields. The shift has been pretty dramatic. I felt that shift in 22 when I was still working as a trauma surgeon. He said soon after COVID hit, suddenly our hospital outcomes and our quality data became hidden and opaque to us. He said prior to this, data was openly shared and we even discussed it in quality assurance meetings. In other words, they would say, okay, so here's the situation that happened and here's the results. What could we have done better? But now with this, they hide everything. He said the hospital forced upon us a narrative that was pure lunacy and contrary to all available observations and previously available data. It was just rampant corruption. So I said from the very beginning, all these people who are defending Trump, all the MAGA cheerleaders, well, it's not Trump, it's the bad Democrat governors. It's like, no, Trump is bribing everybody. He's bribing the governors. He's bribing bad Republican governors who are doing this, but especially bribing the hospitals. And if we go back to August of 2020, I'll never forget seeing the American Hospital Association. Its initials are AHA, and it was an aha moment to see that the CMS, the people who basically reimburse hospitals for Medicare and Medicaid, that they were offering a 20% bonus of everything the hospitals did if the person was a COVID patient. So you can understand that if you're not a COVID patient, get out of here. I need to save these beds for somebody that's going to be identified as a COVID patient so I can get that 20% bonus. And that was in addition to if they just pointed a finger at somebody and said, you got COVID, they got, at that point, they got $13,000. They got $39,000 as a reward from Trump if they put somebody on a ventilator to kill them. It's just unbelievable corruption that was happening with it. Of course, as long as you were surviving while they're in the process of killing you, they could charge you enormous sums for using the ventilator and then get a 20% bonus on that as well. When a local newspaper's headline blared, "Local ICU overwhelmed" in April of 2020, Miller told his colleagues to, quote, laugh at the morons writing this paper because the hospital that was the focus of the article had never been overfull. He said, I knew we were in serious trouble as a medical community when clinical leaders started believing the words in a newspaper and hospital administrators more than their own eyes and their experience. Well, did they really believe them? Or did they use that as an excuse to do what they wanted to do, which was to comply with this, go along with this, to kill people for money? It was about the money. The love of money, the root of all evil, the love of money, the root of the pandemic, folks. It couldn't have happened without the bribery.
If you give people an incentive and then give someone a plausible way out, well, maybe it's not happening here, but that hospital over there, it's probably true there, so we're going to take precautions. It lets them soothe their conscience a little bit. Well, we're making, we need this money so the hospital can stay operational. It's really helping us. We're doing the right thing. It's not
right.
just to enrich ourselves.
That's right.
It gives them this little bit of good feeling they can rely on.
That's right. And so you had a lot of doctors, a lot of scientists who were saying, why are they drawing a hard red line and telling people you can't try ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or any of these other things, anathematizing that, kicking people out of the medical profession for prescribing those types of things, which had a long safety profile. They were just prescribing them for off-label use, which has always been allowed in the past. And so that raised a lot of questions with people in the medical community. But if you're looking at this from a political, historical standpoint, it was crystal clear from the beginning. It was to me. If you knew anything about Dark Winter, you knew that they'd practiced this very thing every year for 20 years. And when you look at what they did after 9/11, that was the first one was 2 months before 9/11. A week after 9/11, they have the anthrax attack, and 2 months later, they push out model legislation to all the states so the states could do it. They didn't want to have it directed from Washington because that'd be a violation of the 10th Amendment, and it would be challenged and shut down. So what they did was they encouraged the states to put these processes on the books, and then they bribed them from Washington, which is what they always do. They do that about everything. They do it about boys in the girls' bathroom and boys and girls' sports. One side will bribe the states to do that. The other side will bribe the states to not do that. But that is the common method. They all understand that. They all use the Federal Reserve's phony monopoly money, which there is an endless supply of. They use that to bribe the states. And it's just a question, we would play the game of scruples. After we went through a few rounds, we said, we keep getting the same types of questions over and over again. They're just changing the dollar amounts here, right? What is your price? At what price will you sell out? At what price do you throw your scruples under the bus? He said, now watch this. Every policy, practice, and quality metric that makes a trauma and surgical program a good patient outcome was undermined or abandoned by my colleagues and by the hospital administration.
It reminds me of that old joke,
Mm-hmm.
A guy walks up to a woman and says, hey, would you sleep with me for $1 million? And the woman says, yes. And the guy says, well, would you sleep with me for $10? She says, what do you think I am, a prostitute? Says, we've established you're a prostitute. We're now just haggling over the price.
That's right. And so they haggled over the price, but they came in with $1 million offer to start with. And the hospitals eagerly said, yes. He said, I found out that all the major healthcare systems in the country had agreed to this action, and that they drove the creation of the policies and demanded physicians act in direct opposition to their oaths. He said, I departed at that point from the medical community in spirit. And so he said, with the help of his pastor, he went on to create a free clinic at his church to care for those who had been ostracized from society. That's exactly what happened. His clinic patients, he said, were met with maskless smiles, with prayer, with support, and with free medical care. Sometimes, he said, people would be waiting in my driveway for me when I arrived home the early morning after a night shift or late night after I had finished a day shift. So what became obvious as the most important thing about our clinic is that our patients needed to be treated as valuable people created in God's image. Folks, this is the basis of a civil society. It is certainly the basis of America's civilization. The idea that we are created equal by God, and as a result, we should be treated equally. We should not have multiple tiers. We should not have the two-tier system that they have in the UK. We should not have a system, as you have being promoted now by many Christians. Oh, well, they're the chosen people. They get to commit murder, start wars. They can execute children. It's okay. We'll give them a pass because they're special. They're better than everybody else. That is a fatal flaw to any society. We're going to take a quick break, folks. We'll be right back.
analyzing the globalists' next move. And now, the David Knight Show.
Hello, it's me, Volodymyr Zelensky. I'm so tired of wearing these same t-shirts everywhere for years. You'd think with all the billions I've skimmed off America, I could dress better. And I could, if only David Knight would send me one of his beautiful gray MacGuffin hoodies or a new black t-shirt with the MacGuffin logo in blue. But he told me to get lost. Maybe one of you American suckers can buy me some at thedavidknightshow.com. You should be able to buy me several hundred. Those amazing sand-colored microphone hoodies are so beautiful. I'd wear something other than green military cosplay to my various galas and social events. If you want to save on shipping, just put it in the next package of bombs and missiles coming from the USA.
Yeah, the MacGuffin is always with us, isn't it? You should put something on there now, especially for kids, right? That's the latest thing that is there. But as I was saying before we went to break, you know, in the Jefferson Memorial, there's a quote from him that he's sworn eternal hostility to every form of tyranny over the mind of man. What is the root of tyranny? I think the root of tyranny is the idea that some people are better than others, that we're not all created equal, that you've got a divine right of kings, or that you've got a master race or a chosen people, or that these babies are not really fully human. And neither are those slaves out there. They're only partially human, so we can treat them as subhuman. That is the enabling position for tyrants. It clears their conscience, and it makes them feel entitled and justified to do this. And that is what we have to oppose. As a matter of fact, we're talking about abortion, which I don't know why that is so different for Christians to understand. They can understand finally that abortion is murder. They can't understand that wars of aggression are murder. They can't understand that assassinations and coups are murders either. Don't call yourself pro-life. If you're going to cheer people like Lindsey Graham, and we've got an essay from somebody I want to cover that is a nominal Christian who does just that. It disgusted me as much as Lindsey Graham disgusts me. But when we look at abortion, we have a Denver Planned Parenthood calling the ambulances for 3 young women in relatively close succession, and one of them did not make it. You know, they always want to talk about women's health, don't they? The abortion pill push to make sure that you can take an abortion pill that you get in the mail and you don't have to have a physician's examination, that should have exposed the idea that they're about women's health as a lie once and for all. Because the bottom line is, one of the reasons that you needed to have a physician to look at is to understand the condition of the pregnancy. How far along is the baby? Is it going to be a threat to the woman's life in and of itself? That is a very serious issue. And if you're going to just push an abortion without any medical exam for the woman, you don't care about her health. You really don't. Colorado has a history of enabling such life-threatening situations. And, you know, we had here's a clinic where they're constantly having to call the ambulance for young women that they're giving abortions to. I remember in Texas, in the wake of the Kermit Gosnell situation that was up in Pennsylvania, he was actually found guilty for the murder of one woman who died in his clinic because he didn't have proper access. They couldn't get the gurneys through to help her. She's bleeding out or whatever the issue was. It was an emergency situation. They were hindered in terms of getting there because of the width of the hallways and the doorways and things like that. So in Texas, in the wake of that, what they did was they came up with some regulations to regulate that. Well, Planned Parenthood didn't want to be regulated in any way, shape, or form. They were not interested in the health and the survival of the women either. And so there was a big pushback in the legislature. And at that time, you had the Democrats out there fighting against this legislation, which just said, basically, you're going to make sure that everything in your clinic is accessible to emergency personnel, and that you have some arrangements with the hospitals for these emergencies or something like that. And so the Democrats were out there protesting, and that was when they did that Hail Satan thing, taunting the people who are pushing safety regulations for women's health. They don't care about anyone's life. As a matter of fact, you look at this, the first person who had this issue, Alexis Arguella, came to Planned Parenthood's Fort Collins location for an abortion at 22 weeks. She suffered an amniotic fluid embolism, a known potential complication of late-term abortions in which amniotic fluid enters the mother's bloodstream. She was transported to a hospital where, despite the emergency staff's best efforts, she passed away as her grandparents watched helplessly. And then in March, there were 2 more emergency medical dispatches to that same location, only 8 days apart. Again, if you say that this is about women's health, you're simply lying. In the same way that the people who are constantly pushing, this is yet another bill. As I pointed out, we had Marsha Blackburn pushing this Kids Online Safety Act to verify everybody digitally to give you permission to use the internet. And here's another one here. This is coming from Democrat Ed Markey. His AI bills would force online age verification, digital ID, as he's saying we're taking power back from big tech. No, they're not. They're using big tech for their power. The fine print says, show us your ID before you're allowed to say a word on the internet. And by the way, I just got to say, every time I see Ed Markey from Massachusetts, I'm always reminded of what he did with Obama's EPA administrator, Lisa Jackson, who, if you remember, she was caught she liked her privacy. She was caught conspiring with people with an assumed alias email. But she conspired with Ed Markey. They had a little show trial where they had obviously set up prearranged dialogue between the two of them. And you could tell that because he stepped on her line and had to back up, and then she repeated the line. And it was so phony. They were talking about how they had to ban barbecue grills and fireplaces and all the rest of the stuff over the presumed threat of fine particulate matter. Now, this was happening at the same time I was involved with some people in North Carolina at Research Triangle Park. The EPA, which was under Lisa Jackson, was caught looking for people who had respiratory and cardiac issues as participants in an experiment. And what they did was they literally hooked them up to diesel tailpipes. It sounds above and beyond anything that could possibly be true, but it was true. And the people I was working with exposed it. And they were they took out the carbon monoxide so the people didn't die, but they hooked them up to the diesel tailpipes. And of course, we made the obvious connection to the Nazis gassing people by putting them in a van and then routing the exhaust back into the closed up area and gassing them while they just drove around. And so at the same time, they were on Capitol Hill and saying, the stuff that's coming out of cars and barbecue grills and fireplaces, that's killing people. It's one of the biggest killers of people out there. This is before we had COVID lies. And I'm not talking about getting people sick. I'm talking about actually killing them, said Lisa Jackson. Meanwhile, her own department in Research Triangle Park at the EPA was running experiments exposing people to 72 times what the legal limit was. They would shut down anything that emitted more than X amount of fine particulate matter. They were exposing these people to 72 times that. And it was one of the people that we worked with who saw that they had some of these emergency issues in a test that they were running and started looking and said, what were they doing? What was the EPA doing there getting people this sick? Well, this is Ed Markey. And Ed Markey was the one who was trying to push that idea that fine particulate matter was actually killing people when it wasn't. And now he is calling he's got a dozen bills that he's bundled under what he calls the AI accountability agenda. And his slogan is taking power back from big tech. Isn't it interesting that the Republicans under Marsha Blackburn will say, we want to make sure that we take the lead in artificial intelligence. We're going to take the lead of AI into the future, to infinity and beyond, right? So she poses as Buzz Lightyear, and the Trump administration does. Meanwhile, the Democrats want to fall back on their position. We're going to fight big tech. And yet both of them are working with big tech because that is their tool for tyranny that they so desperately need. Well, the one thing that Trump is interested in, and it seems like the only thing he's interested in, is this Save America Act about voting. They got him on Fox News to eulogize his friend, Lindsey Graham, and he only wanted to talk about the Save America Act and about the filibuster, which he wants to end, but Lindsey Graham did not want to end. And so the people on Fox News kept trying to turn Trump back to Lindsey Graham. Let's talk about Lindsey and how wonderful Lindsey was. But all he wanted to do was to talk about the Save America Act. Well, Thomas Massey has something to say about that. This obsession with elections that is going on with Trump. This is what Thomas Massey had to say.
I think it's ironic that we control the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the White House, and we're yelling election fraud. I mean, we won all the damn elections, and we're in charge, and what are we doing with it? We're bankrupting the country, we're starting new wars, we're violating the Constitution, we're not cracking down on the fraud. The problem is not the elections. We won the damn elections. The problem is we're wasting our opportunity that the voters gave us. And the Republicans are going to pay for that in November. It'll be an absolute shellacking if they don't wake up.
Well, it's not about winning the elections. It's about preserving Trump's fragile ego. He cannot admit that he ever lost anything. He continues to say that he was elected 3 times. That's what it's really about. It's not about saving America. It's about saving the ego. The ego has landed, and that's the way Trump operates. He doesn't do economics. He does egonomics. He doesn't do geopolitics. He does ego politics. It's always about him. That's reality. You know, it's kind of interesting. Somebody observed that when Trump won in 2016, Obama was president. When he won in 2024, Biden was president. When he lost in 2020, he was president. How does that work out? How does he have, he presided over the corrupt election. He says that he lost, that he won, but then they took it away from him. And he was the one who was president. Yeah, he can't keep his lies straight, can he? Meanwhile, when we look at what is happening with Iran, we have Trump bragging about the fact that he has struck Iran for a 3rd night in a row, but he says the deal is still possible. Do you really think it is? Trump is not only unhinged, but he's unpredictable, but he is predictable in the sense that he is always evil. And he said this about what was going on with Iran. He said, we had a deal.
We hit him very hard last night. Every time they send a drone, we hit him very hard. But we had a deal. What nobody knows, we had a deal. It was a done deal. And then they broke it. They always break it. We've had 10 deals with these people. And so we're just going to hit them very hard. And we're going to keep the strait. And we'll probably run it. We'll become the guardian of the strait. Maybe we'll call it the guardian angel of the strait. And we should be reimbursed for that. When we do that, we're going to be reimbursed because the other nations are very wealthy. They're on our side. And we can't be expected to do that for nothing, unlike we had for many years. You know, we guarded the strait for 50 years more, and we never got paid for it. They made all the money, and the United States was just, they wouldn't. It's amazing. Was
there any of this that's true?
We guarded it for nothing. And now we're going to guard it, and we're going to get paid for guarding it, a lot of money. But we just want to be reimbursed for doing all of this, for putting our people in danger. But we're really not putting people, we're really saving people. Yeah,
right. Yeah, we guarded it for 50 years. Did you really? Were you guarding it when you lost control of it during the Iran war? No. The U.S. was never guarding the Strait of Hormuz. It was never an issue until they attacked Iran. And of course, when you look at this, there is a method to the madness, isn't there? Because when they attack Iran, Iran has promised and follows through to the fact that they're going to then attack other Gulf states, which is exactly what they want to see happen if you are a Zionist. They want the entire region to be destroyed so that Israel becomes more powerful, so that Israel can take their land. That's what this is truly about. This may look like absolute insanity, and it is absolute evil, but there also is a method to this. It's about greater Israel. That's what it's really about. Trump also threatened to destroy Pickaxe Mountain, a deeply buried nuclear site. And the question is, how is he going to do that? The question arose in one of the conversations that he had yesterday. He said they were going to have a nuclear weapon in just 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. But I used nuclear on them. He said that. He said that. So did he really use a nuclear weapon on? Is that why he's saying it's nothing but rubble and it's nothing but nuclear dust? But we got to keep the war going because we got to get that nuclear dust. And then he said at the same time, he said, well, if we go there to just be a PR event, we don't really need to go there, but it'll be a PR event. There's no way that they can do anything there. We've got satellites on the area, and if they show up, I can even read their name tag, right? And they all say Muhammad. But he said, no, we have to continue this war. No, you have to continue this war. We know that because that's what Israel demands. And then he talks about being the guardian of the strait. He's also talking about putting a 20% fee on all cargo that is shipped through the Strait of Hormuz. Folks, this is piracy. This is what the Barbary pirates were doing when Jefferson first used the Marines. And people still sing about that on the shores of Tripoli, right? And this is a mafia boss approach. You know, it's a nice strait you got there. It'd be a shame if anything were to happen to it. How about we take a 20% cut? The Iranian foreign minister immediately mocked Trump's toll threat. He said, there should be guarantees of safe passage through there, and they should be compensated, even though Washington has vehemently opposed the idea that Iran and Oman, which are the two countries that on either side of the strait, they're not allowed to charge tolls, but the United States government is allowed to do that. He said, of course, 20% is way too much, and it is. But this is what Trump told people about the Strait of Hormuz toll.
Well, I think it's going very fast. We've demolished their military. We're hitting them very hard.
So why are you still hitting them if you demolished the military?
Yesterday was all done, and then they broke up that deal immediately because they found out there was something in the deal they didn't like. And they're wired differently, and we're not going to put up with it. We are just going forward. We're attacking them tonight. We're taking out all of their capability for anything having to do with the Strait, with the Hormuz Strait. And I think in the end, we will end up just controlling the whole thing. What they're doing is being very foolish, very stupid, and they've treated people horribly. They killed 52,000 protesters.
Do you see why I began with the what he said about Tiananmen Square? I mean, this really is the authoritarian bullying that he was so proud of the Chinese communists doing. And there is absolutely no justification for what he's doing. And it is absurd. As Emmanuel Macron said, he said, if you want people to take you seriously, don't keep changing your story multiple times a day. When he says, yeah, we take out all their military, how many times has he said that? And then how many times does he go back and say, well, we took out more of their military? Well, you can't take out more of their military if you already took it all out. They boast about having sunken all their navy, which they never had one, but they had small boats. Then they talk about, well, you got a lot of more small boats today, that type of thing. None of this is real. This is all just a reality TV event. It is all just a constant stream of outrages to consume the news cycles that are out there. But this is one thing that I thought was a perfect response to Trump. This is a group that has trolled him in the past. So while he's out there talking about tolls on Hormuz, we've got a group that trolled him. They erected a 10-foot tall Iran War participation trophy on the National Mall. It appeared mysteriously Monday morning on the National Mall. The trophy had a plaque that read, "We hereby award President Trump this participation trophy for his enthusiastic involvement in the Iran War." While some concerned themselves with military strategy, diplomacy, or measurable outcomes, President Trump demonstrated the courage to participate regardless of the final score. As a recipient of this prestigious award, President Trump joins the ranks of children everywhere who receive recognition for simply showing up. And they don't stop there. They also labeled it as the Donald Trump Trophy Donation Center. They said, we hope that if enough trophies are donated, he will be perceived as a winner, and he will not feel the need to bomb other countries. Trump has repeatedly made known that he wants the Nobel Peace Prize. He's as obsessed with it. He basically strong-armed and stole it from the Venezuelan opposition leader, Maria Machado, who submitted and gave him her Nobel Peace Prize because I guess she was hoping that he was going to appoint her as the president of Venezuela, but she didn't get anything in return. You also had the FIFA president, Gianni Infantino, gave Trump the inaugural FIFA Peace Prize. In other words, they had never given any politician a peace prize. But the football league, the World Cup Football League, gave him a prize, and it was, again, kowtowing and appeasement to someone they know as a dictator, a petulant, childish dictator. It was a peace offering to his ego. Secret Handshake is the group that's behind this. They have also, in the past, they put up that golden 12-foot monument to Trump and to Jeffrey Epstein. And if I remember correctly, do you remember that, Travis? They were kissing or something, I think, or something like that, or involved in an embrace somehow.
I think they were hugging shoulder to shoulder, maybe, just like good buddies. I don't remember exactly what it looked like, but I do remember the statue.
They've also put up arcade games on the mall, and they put up a sign on the arcade game. They called it Operation Epic Furious. Straight to hell, and they spell straight S-T-R-A-I-T, like Hormuz. I like these guys. There's nothing better than satire. And if you're going to give Trump a participation trophy, you could not characterize what he's doing any better than that. As a matter of fact, this was done on the anniversary of the so-called assassination attempt at Butler. And when Trump is out there talking about, well, the Iranians want to kill me, surprise, surprise, somebody put up I thought was a perfect comeback to that. They said, dear Iranians, don't shoot him in the ears. They grow back. The ear shows what a lie that was. But that was really the seminal moment. That was the moment at which the big tech people said, wait a minute, if he can pull this off and people believe that happened, this guy making himself a hero, and he's built many monuments to himself with his arm up in the air saying, fight, fight, fight. And that was the moment in which they got behind him because they realized he was such a powerful creator of illusions. Meanwhile, Netanyahu has confirmed plans to merge the U.S. and Israeli militaries. Let me tell you how I understand this. We know that this has been going on for quite some time. We know that they get to do whatever they want to do, and they know how to control Trump, and they've got people like Lindsey Graham there who will whisper in his ear like Grimer Wormtongue. But I think the reality of this is that they're going from a de facto merging and a de facto subordinate situation where we are subordinate to Israel. They're going to a de jure situation. So they're going to make it what has happened in reality. They're going to give it legal cover. And we've seen this type of thing happen before in the past. You know, when you look at FISA and the FISA court and that type of thing, from their very inception, the CIA and the NSA were spying on Americans without search warrants. And so what they do is the result of the church committee hearings was to put in FISA to say, you're not going to spy on Americans without a search warrant. You're not going to spy on foreigners in America without a search warrant. Only on foreigners in foreign countries. And you're going to go to a court to get that warrant. But of course, the court is like a little star chamber process. One judge and no questions asked. We give you a legal cover. And then they went even further. And they put in Section 702. And that basically gave them legal cover to do what they were doing illegally. And so I think that is really what is happening with this. Will the drawing down of foreign aid over the next 10 years be compensated by the proposal to have a merging of some sort between our Pentagon and your military? Yeah, said Rachel Campos was asking that first part of that, asked that to Netanyahu. He's the one who said, yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. And so Trump was, again, if you don't think that they control us, just look at how Lindsey Graham went to Israel and talked to Netanyahu about strategies and how they could approach Trump. And I'm sure a big part of that was to appeal to his vanity and his ego and his pride at what he had just done in Venezuela. They also brought in Netanyahu and the Mossad. They had a meeting that was there.
I also want to point out, sorry to cut you off, but if anyone thinks that they're going to reduce the amount of weapons they're sending to Israel, they're crazy. This is not going to mean, oh, well, they're carrying their own water now. This just means they are going to be rolled in under the U.S. military so they can have anything they want.
Yeah, it'll actually increase. And it'll do so without any public perception of this. Because the public sees that they've given them a grant of like $3.5 billion or something like that a year, and people don't like that. So let's just hide that. We'll take it out in a way that people don't see it. And so when you have what Netanyahu has been saying for over 30 some odd years, that Iran was going to have a nuclear weapon within weeks, Trump says that. He says, yeah, when I took out their nuclear facility, they were going to have a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks if I hadn't hit them with nuclear. That's what he said. So he's saying that he hit them with nuclear. And they would have had the nuclear weapon within 2 weeks. So then why are we still there? You didn't get your regime change. What you got was, what you did was you moved everybody that was moving away from this repressive regime in Iran. They ran to it for safety because you attacked. And now you're saying, well, we're going to make sure that it's no nuclear weapons. That is not anything that is really happening either. That's in direct contradiction to what you have said you're doing. So they asked the Iranian ambassador if they wanted nuclear weapons. He said, no, we don't want any nuclear weapons. He said, they said, will you accept Trump's request for inspections? He said, of course, if we can send our team to Israel to see whether or not they have nuclear weapons, to see if Israel has them. Again, it's the United States and Israel who either talk about using nuclear weapons or who do use nuclear weapons. And so the ICC has issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant. So the U.S. State Department is moving to abolish the International Criminal Court. Rubio is protecting mass murdering, genocidal rapists, torturers, and thieves, and also protecting people like Roberto Duterte that Trump admired because he was doing extrajudicial killing of people, just accusing them of running drugs. And so, in a sense, I look at this and it's like, yeah, certainly they're doing this to help Netanyahu and these other Israeli leaders who are guilty of war crimes and mass murder. But they're probably also trying to protect themselves. Who knows? I mean, there's not any way for the International Criminal Court to come to America and to arrest people. Of course, they can't go to Israel and do that either, but it still concerns Netanyahu and Gallant and these other Israeli leaders that maybe at some point when they're traveling around, they might get arrested. And the same concern might be there for these Trump regime officials because they're not always going to be in power. And we need to remember that because all the things that they are doing, not only is it building up and storing up criminal charges and wrath for them later in their life, but it is also setting precedents for things that are going to be done to us as Trump is making himself and setting up this surveillance state, setting up this police state, spying on people and getting rid of any reasonable rules of engagement, any restraint on his federal police, the ICE people that are out there. As he's doing that, understand all of that is going to be used by the Democrats when they get into power. You need to think about that. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will be right back. Stay with us. Every time I look at that, I think about that movie Shenandoah with Jimmy Stewart. A story about a family that was in the Civil War and how they got caught up on both sides of it, and how the father, who was adamantly against getting involved in the war and getting involved in somebody else's fight, he lost some of his children. Their farm was destroyed, and spent a lot of time trying to find a child who was kidnapped by one side. And this is the way this always goes. So this is why we need to oppose these wars, whether they are foreign or domestic. And of course, Trump is pushing wars, foreign and domestic. He's at economic warfare loggerheads of people, pushing sanctions and trying to punish countries to show that he is in charge, that you don't dare cross him. He's going to show his power and his strength by pushing people, whether it's Greenland or whether it is Russia. He's going to be doing that type of thing. But we, remember what I think it was Washington who said, government is a fearful servant and a dreadful master. Well, the same thing is true of war. War is a fearful servant. These people who, like Lindsey Graham and others, Trump, who want to use war to serve their interests, they need to be careful about it becoming their master. And so it was very disturbing for me to see that World magazine had a eulogy, basically, for Lindsey Graham. And the stuff that they were saying, I just could not believe. I had to show this to you. An American Life in Public Service. Lindsey Graham was a globe-trotting, practical politician who made important contributions to foreign policy. Well, yes, you could say that they're very important. When you start wars everywhere, those are very important. Here's somebody who pushed the Iraq War, as well as at the inception of weaponizing Ukraine as a cat's paw, as a surrogate to go after Russia and Putin. And they made no bones about it. They didn't try to keep it hidden. As I played for you, John McCain, as well as Lindsey Graham, going there and saying, next year in 2017, we're going into Russia and we're going to get Putin. That was 6 years before Putin invaded Ukraine. Alexander Dugin in Russia, who has been referred to as Putin's philosopher, said that Lindsey Graham showed Trump's dark side. Yeah, he really was the Grimer worm tongue that was whispering in his ear about these wars. But I think that, when they say that he made important contributions to foreign policy, yes, they were important, but they were also evil. And a Christian publication should be able to tell the difference between these two. And again, they're blinded to this. They're blinded to the evil that he did. They're blinded to the wars that he started, due to the fact that their heart and their theology is basically denying Christ and replacing him with a foreign government that is all about war. Christ came for all types of people. That's what I was saying before. When we talk about there's no difference between male and female in Christ, there's no difference between Jew and Greek in Christ, right? Or Jew and Gentile. And there was no difference between slave or free. We're talking about there's no difference between gender, let's say. There's no difference between ethnic groups. There's no difference between your economic status. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or if you're a slave. You're all the same before the sight of God and before the sight of Christ. That, folks, is the gospel. That is good news. That is good news because God gives an opportunity to each and every one of us. He doesn't exclude us. He doesn't play favorites. He doesn't have a master race or a chosen people. His chosen people are those who trust in him, who follow him. All of Israel was never all of Israel. That's the bottom line. It was always a portion, even when it was a ethnic state that was a picture of what Christ would do with his kingdom when he came. And his kingdom is not of this world, and it is not in the Holy Land. That is not Christ's kingdom. His kingdom is within you, unless you want to replace him and appoint some secular state involved in genocide as your object of worship. But they say this about Lindsey Graham, this Christian publication. It says his passion for service and for politics, they don't say his passion for war, and his wily survival skills, in other words, his chameleon-like skills to suck up to anyone when it was to his advantage, might have carried him into the ranks of the longest-serving Senate members in the history of the Republic. He was heavily favored to win election for a fifth term in office in this year's election cycle. He came to national attention in the House impeachment managers for Clinton's misdeeds at the beginning of his second term. Like Richard Nixon, Lindsey Graham would ride a prosecutorial role in the national scandal all the way to the U.S. Senate. Many will recall his impassioned defense of Brett Kavanaugh during the Supreme Court confirmation. Is that going to be the epithet on his tombstone, or is it going to be all the wars that he started? Graham became one of the real veterans of the institution and a legitimate expert. He was a strong advocate for Israel. There you go. This is why this Christian publication, nominally Christian, is applauding this evil that this man has done, because they applaud anything that is done for Israel. They're about Israel first and always, just like Lindsey Graham was. A relationship builder with Saudi Arabia and a determined opponent of Iran. Although he worked on a global scale, Senator Graham was also a consummate South Carolinian politician, a familiar figure at pastoral luncheons and pro-life banquets. I can't think of anybody that was more anti-life than Lindsey Graham. I think he's killed more people than Planned Parenthood, quite frankly, of all ages. There's pregnant women that are killed when you drop bombs as well, aren't they? This was closer to the mark. This is a historian from Germany, and he is writing on RT. He said Lindsey Graham was a monster, but unfortunately he was not exceptional. That's right, we have too many people of his ilk. He said Lindsey Graham is dead, and if we were to apply the old Spartan and Roman adage, about the dead, say nothing but good, he said, well, then that's where this text would have to end. I don't have anything good to say about him, right? So he says, but some readers may find this shocking or unkind, but it is a fact. There is no way to write about the intriguingly sudden end of the long-term U.S. Senator from South Carolina in a balanced manner and still stay honest. Graham was cartoonishly evil. Since he was also very powerful, his moral depravity made a big difference to the lives of all too many. Downplaying the fact out of the misplaced piety would be perverse. It would mean to disrespect the many victims of perfidious and brutal U.S. and, in fact, Israeli policies of vicious violence and outrageous injustice that Graham promoted with every fiber of his being for his entire political life. During the Gaza genocide, when challenged specifically about the Israeli mass killings of civilians, including women and children, Lindsey Graham launched into what can only be called a psychopathic rant, comparing the Israeli genocide of the Palestinians with American warfare against Germany and Japan in World War II, and drawing the conclusion that Gaza should be flattened, including with nuclear weapons. And again, as I said, every time and he made that statement multiple times. Lindsey Graham was constantly referring back to that and saying, yeah, we used nuclear weapons, and it was great that we did that. I said, you attacked civilian populations with nuclear weapons. You didn't attack Japanese military installments with that. And, I got to say that is something that I really have, in my later years, I grew up always hearing that argument that it was justified, that it saved lives because of the massive casualties that we had at Iwo Jima. But of course, Lindsey Graham doesn't care about that either. He's more than willing to sacrifice more Marines to take Carg Island. And Scott Ritter, a former Marine, railed against Lindsey Graham for that. He said, you didn't ever fight anything like that, but you're more than willing to take 7,000 casualties and say, my money's on the Marines, that type of thing. Well, if you want to save Marine lives, then use your nuclear weapons against the soldiers, the installations that are there, instead of against civilians. That was not justifiable, but I understand that generation. My parents were of that generation. My mother always had a resentment against Japan because of Pearl Harbor. And she made it pretty clear to me. And I think it also involved the fact that as a result of Pearl Harbor, my dad signed up for the Navy, and he got on a sub chaser. Now, he survived. He wasn't there for too long before they moved him to a different position. But she's sitting there looking at Pearl Harbor, and she's thinking about her husband who's going to die, and it just created a deep-seated hatred. And that's why we have to be careful about wars and the ways that we wage them and the narratives that we tell about them. To his dying day, Graham never showed an ounce of compassion for those who were slaughtered by his Israeli friends. He did everything he could to support the slaughter. Of course, that's also why internationally wanted war criminal Netanyahu rushed to offer his personal condolences. You should pay attention to the people who are eulogizing Lindsey Graham. As a matter of fact, we go back to this. Let me play this for you.
So when we were faced with destruction as a nation after Pearl Harbor, fighting the Germans and the Japanese, we decided to end the war by bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki with nuclear weapons. That was the right decision. Give Israel the bombs they need to end the war they can't afford to lose and work with them to minimize casualties. Well, can I say this? Why is it okay for America to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end their existential threat war?
It wasn't.
Is it okay for us to do that? I thought it was okay. To Israel, do whatever you have to do to survive as a Jewish state.
Lindsey Graham, he loves war. He loves killing people. He loves killing civilians. Again, this is something that began in World War II. And it was the Nazis who started launching their bombs in a sustained campaign against London. And then we became the monsters that we fought, didn't we? It's an irony of history, or maybe divine justice, that Lindsey Graham lived just long enough to see the U.S. follow his insane, corrupt advice and to suffer a geopolitically catastrophic defeat for it. Yet Graham was a monster long before the Gaza genocide. He was obsessed with brutalizing as many other countries and societies as possible. He could not see an opportunity for war and not do his worst to make it happen. Graham's record of warmongering is so extensive that it's hard to reproduce it in its entirety. You can't. Just shortly before his end, he had been calling for more U.S. violence in Cuba and Lebanon and Nigeria and Venezuela and in Yemen. And apart, obviously, from his eternal compulsion to scream for and effect more dead Palestinians and Iranians. And in this article, they didn't even mention Ukraine and the fact that he's there saying, we're going to take this to Putin. We're going to get Putin next year. We're going to invade, and you guys are going to do it, right? So he was saying he went to Ukraine, he and John McCain, to push that coup that was being done by the Obama administration. And then he goes back and he tells the soldiers that are there, he says, and you're going to, I want to send your sons and daughters to go fight Putin. Just like he told the people of South Carolina who wanted to send their sons and daughters to go fight for Israel. Graham was always among those most brutally open about using Ukraine and its people for geopolitical and commercial interest in the U.S. He praised opportunities to rob Ukraine of crucial raw materials, the rare earths. He clearly considered pumping money into his ultra-corrupt Zelensky regime to be a great deal, as it produced dead Russians. He thought it's the best money he ever spent. I mean, kill more Russians. He failed to mention that it also killed a lot of Ukrainians as well. And those people who were onto the scheme, who did not want to be sent to the front lines, are being shanghaied by gangs in Ukraine who are jumping them, beating them, and in many cases killing them before they could get them to the front line. Lindsey Graham was a revolting man. His viciousness was glaringly obvious. He was not a complicated case. He wasn't a conflicted character. He wasn't a man who had elements of light and dark. He was among the closest to pure, unadulterated, shamelessly brazen evil that many of us will ever lay eyes on. Of course, we still have Netanyahu to look at, don't we? And Trump. That is why it is telling, but it is not surprising to see who is lining up to let us know how much they will miss him. And I tell you, mark those people. Mark them. Understand who they are. As horrible as Graham was, he was also representative of the elites of the U.S. and of the West. Normal people should be ashamed to be seen with him, dead or alive, but not Western elites. They boast about their intimacy with him. Graham was the ugly and all too realistic face of the West and its leaders in Washington. He is gone. Everyone and everything else, however, is still in place. As he said, we're killing all the right people. And he could not contain his joy at doing that. Well, somebody in Russia should take Putin out, he said in 2023. He said, Russians are dying, the best money we have ever spent. He also said that in 2023. In 2024, Lindsey Graham said, Gaza should be flattened. This is Hiroshima and Nagasaki on steroids. If I were Israel, I'd do the same. Do whatever you have to do. Do what I want you to do. Now, that's it. That's Lindsey Graham in a nutshell.
So when we were faced with destruction as a nation, after
Played that
Pearl
clip.
Harbor,
Let's go on to Trump talking about how he nuked Iran. Yeah.
We hit them very hard last night. Every time they send a drone, we hit them very hard. But we had a deal. What nobody knows, we had a deal. It was a done deal. And then they broke it. They always break it. We've had 10 deals with these people. And so we're just going to hit them very hard. And we're going to keep the strait, and we'll probably run it. We'll become the guardian of the strait. Maybe we'll call it the guardian angel.
Yeah, well, there's also a clip where he talked about how, well, they had the nuclear, so we used nuclear on them to stop that. They're only 2 weeks away from getting a bomb. You know, they've been 2 weeks away from a bomb for 35 years. Well, J.D. Vance says, well, I empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that we had dumb presidents back then. Now we have dumb Americans to go along with them, if you follow what J.D. Vance is telling you here.
The second thing is, Kristen, I certainly empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives. So this is not going to be some long, drawn-out thing. We've got in, we've done the job of setting their nuclear program back. We're going to now work to permanently dismantle that nuclear program over the coming years, and that is what the president has set out to do. Simple.
Yeah, that's what he set out to do. And of course, that editorial pointed out, he may be gone, but there are many more that are just as evil. And you just saw one of them right there. So the FBI has entered his home in Capitol Hill yet again. This is the second time that they've gone in. So what's up with that? One person on Twitter said, a Kentucky statesman said, they're removing all the evidence that Lindsey Graham was a foreign agent of Israel. Perhaps that's the case. I don't think they're going to see anything about an alleged murder. I don't know why people think that that is even a possibility. Obviously, when you look at the guy, he's obviously evil. He's obviously not in great health either. He wasn't as bad as Mitch McConnell, but still, why is it so hard for people to believe that someone can die suddenly from an aneurysm or something like that, an aortic dissection, I think they called it. Basically, high blood pressure splitting your aorta. That is a perfectly ordinary thing, and it's not all that unusual for somebody of his age. But while we're talking about his legacy, let's not forget, as they point out in this thing, that he's been involved in starting so many wars that we can't even list them all. But here he is, pushing the lies about weapons of mass destruction, just like they pushed the lies about Iran's nuclear program being 2 weeks away. They pushed the lies about weapons of mass destruction, and he was very proud of that, putting that in and getting the Iraq War started.
I believe that Saddam Hussein is giving aid and comfort, training and assistance to al-Qaeda murderers, that he has weapons of mass destruction. He is lying when he says he doesn't, and he will never voluntarily disarm. 500 inspectors, 5,000 inspectors are not going to make him disarm. He is a danger to our country and the world. He is killed. So yeah, let's have an Iraq War. How'd that turn out for us either, right? Yet another legacy of that evil man. Well, as I said before, the government continues to engage in these acts of aggression, of wars, of assassinations, of coups, and acting in a manner of aggression toward Americans domestically, and getting increasingly paranoid when you look at all the things that are happening in and around the White House. Donald Trump's construction projects in and around the White House, the so-called ballroom and everything, it's not a measure really of his ego and his vanity as much as it is his paranoia, concerned that he needs to have some kind of a bunker that he can get to in a hurry because of all the conflicts that he's creating everywhere. And they have a new Chevy Suburban, the Secret Service's new anti-drone weapon. The Secret Service's Counter Unmanned Aerial Systems Branch
is operating a specially equipped Chevy Suburban Premier known as Hindsight to detect and to mitigate suicide drones and other loitering munitions during national security events and other high-profile security operations, according to the Instagram account My Fire and Police. And so when you look at this, is this something that they're really going to be able to control? I mean, we look at how effective these drones have been in the back and forth for both sides, for both Ukraine and for Russia. How are they going to be able to control this for the president? Perhaps he should alter his policies and try to actually be a peace president. Maybe he should try to live at peace with people. No, what they're going to do is they're going to ramp up the security around them, thinking that they're going to be able to protect themselves. It's likely outfitted with jamming equipment, yet we have seen fiber optic drones already in Mexico, which cannot be jammed electronically. They don't communicate electronically. They communicate via fiber optics. And this has really upped the level of warfare and of destruction that we see happening on the front lines of Ukraine and Russia, the horrific scenes we see of people because they capture the video of the people that they're killing. And so you see these people, running from this drone before the screen blacks out as it makes a suicide run against them. And so when Trump took office in January of 2025, remember, he told the companies, he said, well, this electric grid that we have is pretty old. It's not reliable. And it's very vulnerable, too. It could be taken out very easily. So all you corporations out there, make your own power plants and put them right next to your facility there. Because he doesn't care about protecting us. They're concerned about protecting their data centers. They're concerned about protecting their critical infrastructure. It's very much like what I said before, the Raven Rock book, which got my attention right away because the book begins with Richard Nixon leaving Washington and handing over the nuclear football to someone else. And he was in communication as he was heading to California with these various locations that were set up as communication hubs that were deep underground at the time. And one of them was very close to where we used to live in a rural part of North Carolina called Big Hole. And that's where he starts the book. So that's kind of interesting. But as he goes through it, and he talks about the callous attitude of people in power toward the lives of you and I, as he was going through all of that, he said, well, that was the attitude back then. But of course, that's all changed. They love us now, right? They want to keep us secure. Nothing could be further from the truth. I've seen the same thing as people went through. It was Annie Jacobson did an excellent book on DARPA and also on Operation Mockingbird. She said Operation Paperclip, which Mockingbird was about the press. Operation Paperclip, where they brought in the biological and chemical war criminals and created their criminal program as well. Both of them would say, well, that's the way it was. We've got the documents now. We can see what these people are doing, but they don't do that now. And it's like, don't you understand? Human nature does not change. That's why what the founders said about government is so timeless, because they weren't addressing something that was unique at the time. They were talking about the nature of humanity, and they were talking about what power and money does to humanity. So that is really timeless. And unfortunately, the DARPA of today and the national security of today, none of that has changed. They don't care about our infrastructure. They don't care about any of that. They just want to preserve their lives and their infrastructure. And that's one of the reasons I'll just mention again, Jack Lawson Books has an excellent 2-volume book thing, and it's on sale this month, the month of July. You got 45% off, but it is comprehensive, and it not only talks about preparation, not only talks about even nuclear war. If you're not in the initial blast, how do you survive the fallout? And that was something that he did in the military, but he's got a lot of people talking about their area of expertise in it as well. It's an excellent information source, and one of the key things about it is that he focuses not necessarily just on your defense and on what you need to do in terms of nuclear fallout or food preparation and things like that, but he talks about the human element. How do you interact with people to get something like this started? And how do you understand the group dynamics that are going to be involved in it? That's one of the key things. And if we understand that, we can start to build a resilient society from the roots up, which is what we have to do. Rather than hoping that it's going to happen from the top down. It'll never happen from the top down. The fish is rotting from the head down. But we can build this back from the bottom up, but we have to do that with small communities. And that's a big part of what he talks about in his book. Before we run out of time, I want to get some of the comments here. iHandy said the hospitals here don't differentiate between vaxxed and unvaxxed just by blood types. Pure blood and not pure blood, I guess, right? Guard Goldsmith said, at Logan Airport in 2004, I got to ask Ed Markey if he voted for the money to send to Massachusetts Big Dig. And he said yes. So I asked him to give me a ride home if he felt so strongly about making my travel easy in Boston. Oh, that's a good one, Guard. Yeah, he's, need to ask him how many people the EPA killed with their with their experiments that were criminal, because they did it without informed consent. They weren't telling the people. They were exposing them to 72 times the acceptable limit according to the EPA. At the same time, she's saying, no, I'm not talking about making people sick. I'm talking about killing people. So they ramp it up because they want to use some people who get sick. They want to use that to shut down cars, to shut down fireplaces, to shut down barbecue grills, to shut down life. And so, as I mentioned before, Trump goes on with Fox News. They wanted him to eulogize Lindsey Graham, but he was not interested in that at all. As a matter of fact, when we look at this merger that is happening, I said that it has already happened by de facto. It's already an accomplished fact. They just want to get legal cover for this. And it's basically what a retired Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson was saying. He said, I watched Mossad take over the Pentagon in 2002.
And it's unquestionable that the Epstein business was heavily influenced, let me put it that way, by Mossad.
And so that's somehow emblematic on these huge geopolitical issues.
Yes, I watched Mossad take over the Pentagon in 2002. The Pentagon was infiltrated by Mossad. They did not need any identification to get through the river entrance of the building. They went upstairs to Douglas Feith, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, the third most powerful man in the Defense Department. Occasionally, they went to the second most powerful man, Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and they had run of the Pentagon. Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said to my boss one time, hell, I don't run my building. Mossad does.
It's kind of interesting, John Kiriakou, who was the one who blew the whistle on the lies about weapons of mass destruction and the torture that was used to produce those lies by Gina Haspel, another person that, just like Lindsey Graham, you had Donald Trump promote Gina Haspel, who produced those lies and who covered up the torture program. He put her in as head of the CIA and kept her there. Well, before we end the program, I thought this was very interesting. Who wants their child to be a millionaire? This is a Fox News article that is cheerleading the so-called Trump accounts, where the government will give you $1,000 for your child if they're born since Trump became president. But of course, you can put money into that account as well. And they say you're going to turn that $1,000 into $1 million. Well, you got to have some pretty big return on that money. Or perhaps they're banking on hyperinflation coming from Donald Trump. I remember there was a joke when inflation really kicked off in the 1970s. This guy is in suspended animation. He comes back and he calls the bank and he finds out he's got millions of dollars in his bank account. And then, of course, this is on a payphone in those days. The operator says, could you deposit another $50,000 for the next 2 minutes? That's basically what you're going to say. I think all of our children are going to become millionaires if we don't stop the inflation. But you can take your kids to Tony Arterburns' Wise Wolf Gold, and that's one way that you can preserve your money and watch that grow and keep its value. Again, you can find that through davidknight.gold. Thank you. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Past to track and control us. Their Commons Project, to make sure the commoners own nothing, and the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.
Though he